I'm ready to go. Good morning, everybody. Hello. Thank you for joining me this morning. I am currently based in the UK on the south coast in the beautiful seaside town of Bournemouth. So that's where I'm coming from. I guess you're coming from all around Lithuania. Sorry, Latvia rather. So thank you once again for joining me for this session all about formative assessment. Which I think is a really kind of up and coming kind of theme area, which a lot of teachers kind of are unfamiliar with, because historically education has put a focus on summative assessment, i.e. what students know at the end of a learning period. And I think nowadays, especially given the fact we're now in a sort of a blended learning era, and for a lot of us, we have been teaching online, it can be far more useful, far more beneficial to do formative assessment. So that's kind of the reason why I chose this topic. And in terms of what we're going to cover today, we're going to first of all just define what exactly we mean by formative assessment. We're then going to look at why it's so important. And then finally, the main bulk of the session will be looking at how we can include it in our everyday teaching. But before we go any further, I want to do a quick poll, but it's a kind of different type of poll. We're going to be using your annotation tools. So at the top of your Zoom screen, there should be a button that says View Options. I want you to click on that button and you get a drop-down menu. And on there, you'll have Annotate or Annotations. I want you to click on that button, Annotate or Annotations. Then you have different options. I want you to click on the stamp tool. I'm going to share mine with you so you can see what it looks like. So you've got the stamp tool here and you have different options. A tick, a cross, heart, stars, question marks. What I would like you to do is to answer this question using either the tick or the cross. And this is the question. I already use formative assessment in my classroom. I already use formative assessment in my classroom. Okay, thank you. Iga, Greenberger, who else? We've got a few crosses already. Good, Biber. Good, Inga, thank you. Anywhere on the screen's great. I love this. Lovely, there we go. Lots of ticks, a few crosses. Excellent. Oh, Alexander's done a nice little tick there. Host Gundar's done a nice star. I'm going to guess that means yes. Okay. Thank you, Dache, Inese. Okay, perfect. So a little bit of a mix, but most of us are doing some form of formative assessment, which is great to see. Okay, so some of us are already doing it, which is good. So based on that, I want you to give me what you think formative assessment actually is. So in the chat box, can you write a very short definition of your understanding of what formative assessment is? And you'll be getting a picture here that I like to make my sessions very interactive. So using the chat box, what is formative assessment in your opinion? I'll read some of them out. Okay, Don Cooklis has learned something already. Or maybe he's learned something already, I should say. Good. Okay. What is formative assessment in your opinion? It's a short sentence. Direct studies for the learner. Okay, interesting. Any other thoughts and opinions? Clear the screen quickly. Make students understand how they can learn better. It includes that definitely, Dinah. Regular encouraging to assess in order to help learners to understand what is learned and to grow. Good, Liena. Degustation, says Yelena. I think I know what you mean by that. I think you mean kind of reflection a little bit on what you've done. Wow. Diana's got a very detailed one there, which is probably very similar to what I've got. An assessment, informal or otherwise, that is measured, taken to understand where students are in regards to the material and helps me to understand what as a teacher I must do next. That is pretty much perfect. So thank you very much, Daira. So, in a nutshell, in my opinion, this is a great way to monitor the learners by giving them appropriate feedback, refreshing good Irina. So great reactions. This is it's a Wikipedia one. It's a range of formal and informal assessment procedures conducted by teachers during the learning process. Key thing here, during the learning process, in order to modify teaching and learning and to improve student attainment. It typically involves qualitative feedback rather than scores for both student and teacher that focuses on the details of content and performance. So like I say, there are two kind of things here. It's informal and formal. A lot of teachers are under the impression that formative assessment is just what we do in the classroom in an informal basis. This is not the case. There are also more formal types of formative assessment, as we shall see as we go through the session. And like I say, it's during, it's in preparation for that final summative assessment, should they have it. Okay, and there's a really nice analogy that Robert E. Stake makes about it. So he says that when the cook tastes the soup, that's formative. When the guests taste the soup, that's summative assessment. So a very kind of clear difference there. Okay, that's what it is. Why? Why should we do it? Well, there are many reasons why we should do it, but I think in some respects we need to think back to why formative assessment kind of came about, why it appeared in the first instance. Now, according to research by Lang in 2008, the formative assessment process came from educators working on ways to accelerate student achievement and help predict how students will perform on standards-based, high-stake, summative assessment. So it improves performance, and as Trish Martin from the East Carolina University tells us, it is one of the most powerful and impactful methods for improving student learning ever studied. Now, if that's the case, we have to think, why are we not all doing this all of the time? If it is so powerful and so impactful on students' learning, we have to be doing this as much as we can. In fact, according to some research garnered from 250 studies, they reveal that formative assessment can actually double student learning grades, which is huge, right? If you can double all of your students' grades, why wouldn't you do it? So for me, that's kind of the main reason why we're doing it. We're improving students' grade, improving students' performance. But there are, of course, other reasons why we should do formative assessment. Quick list. It makes student progress more visible. And if it's more visible, it's more accurate. An end of term test, an end of year test only tells you what they know on one day. Formative assessment tells you what they know on every day, in every lesson. Therefore, it is far more accurate. It gauges learning on a regular, often daily basis. Me as a practitioner, I would say you have to do it every single lesson. It gives a more detailed overview of your students' ability. Getting that regular update. What else? It gives immediate and personalized feedback, or allows for that. So instead of waiting till the end of a week, end of a term, you have that interaction with learners. They know how they are doing all the way along the process, not just at the end. It allows for, as Daria said, it allows for remedial work. It allows for reteaching, reassessing. In other words, it makes you as a teacher more effective. It's less stressful for students. They don't have to worry about an end of year term, end of year test. There's no cramming needed. There's increased learner engagement because they know that everything that they're doing in class is being formatively assessed.
Mm-hmm.
It increases students' own awareness of their strengths and weaknesses. And I think that's a really, really key point. It almost gives students more agency, more, more awareness of where they are, what they're good at, what they're not good at. Therefore, what they should be focusing on. And last one, it enables teachers to reflect on their own teaching. It makes, like I said, it makes you better teachers. So lots of reasons why we should be doing formative assessment. And, we can argue about which one is the most important reason. But just as a very quick poll again, using your stamps in your annotation tool, can you just tick the reason that you think is the best reason for formative assessment? So for example, if you think it is the fact it allows for immediate feedback, tick there. If you think it's for increased engagement, tick there. You just tick whichever one you think is the strongest reason, the most beneficial reason for formative assessment. And there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. It's just to keep you involved. And as you'll kind of see, this is me formatively assessing you. Right at the start, I asked you if you use it. What is your thoughts? What is your view on what formative assessment is? What do you think the advantages are? All the way through, I'm going to be formally or formatively assessing you and how you feel about formative assessment. Okay, so it seems there it's a bit of a mix. I think increases student awareness of own strengths and weaknesses got the most ticks probably. Perfect. But like I say, there's no, there's no right answer, there's no wrong answer. Okay. The question we need to consider though as well is this. I'm going to clean the screen actually, all the ticks. Are there any drawbacks? I think we have to assess this because if we didn't, it would be a miss of us not to look at the other side of the coin. Now, it depends on your perspective, right? Again, coming back to Trish Marston, she says that if formative assessment is done correctly, there are no disadvantages to the students. But note, this is no disadvantages to the student. Of course, I don't want to say there's disadvantages to the teacher, but it is, or it can be, time consuming for teachers. Because in addition to planning the assessments to use daily, teachers also need to take time to analyze the results, provide detailed feedback to students. So realistically, it can take up a degree of time. That said, it doesn't have to. If we kind of get into routines, we build it into our everyday lessons. Okay. And certainly we don't want to spend the whole lesson doing formative assessment type tasks, right? Because otherwise we'll get nothing done. It's building it into our lesson plans in a seamless, easy way. And yeah, and Fiona says this was hardest during the remote teaching. It is trickier during remote teaching, but it is still possible. And I will share a couple of online tools that you can use for this as well. So we'll look at some online and some offline tools that you can use for formative assessment. Okay, so that's what it is. That's why we do it. How does it look like in the classroom? What does it look like in practice? How can we incorporate it into our everyday classes? So I'm going to share here lots of different ideas in the next half an hour or so. Now, I might be sharing ideas you already know. Hopefully you're going to learn some new ideas as well. And maybe you can share ideas with us. So again, I'm just going to open this up to you very quickly. In the chat box, can you write down 1 or 2 things that you already do that you would consider as being an example of formative assessment? What do you already do? Okay, Don makes a good point there about obviously taking time for teachers. Yeah, they're paid for 50% of their contact time for planning evaluations, etc. So yeah. No, no, I totally get that, Tom, which is why we say there's disadvantages, no disadvantages for the students, but for the teachers, there are some. But as teachers, we obviously have our students' best interest at heart. Okay, good, Dara. Exit tickets, lovely. We can look at exit tickets later on for sure. Thumbs up, thumbs down, good, Inez say, or Inez. Voting, comments, praise. I'd be careful about using the word praise in Guna. I don't think praise is necessarily formative assessment. It's just saying well done. It's not actually being objective about what they've done. It's quite subjective. Okay, lovely. Biber, at the end of every lesson, ask them to write 3 things they learned, then comment individually. Good. Kahoot, love Kahoot. Good, Dinah. Exit tickets, great. So look, some of these things I'm going to cover as well. So I apologize if you're already using this, but hopefully there'll be other ideas as well. So quite a few of you mentioned about exit tickets, but nobody mentioned about entry tickets. So entry tickets are obviously done at the start of the class, in those kind of marginal minutes at the beginning of the class, when students are still coming in, they're still kind of getting ready for the lesson. So, you know, starting the lesson off with a quick question about the previous day's work while students getting settled can be really beneficial, because, you know, it might be a day, it might be 2 days since their last lesson. Can they remember? How much can they remember? They're just doing maybe a quick kind of quiz using grammar, vocabulary from the previous lesson. You know, I'm a big fan of starting a lesson with a quick game. It might be a quick Kahoot game. It might be a quick Quizlet game. It just depends. But it's just like 3 or 4 minutes at the beginning of the lesson. How much can my students remember about what they did? And it gives me a clearer idea of how they're doing. Alternatively, you can maybe ask them the question, what do you already know about what we're going to be learning in the lesson? So what do you already know about the present continuous? So this is what I did with you almost. I almost did an entry ticket. Do you use formative assessment? What do you know about formative assessment? That for me is formative assessment, because finding out what you already know and then teaching from there. Now, of course, if I was completely flexible in my presentation, a lot of you've said already that you know about exit tickets, so I would skip that. And I might go through it a bit faster than I would have done. So it allows you to edit what you're going to do, focus on what the students actually need to have. So think about an entry ticket. It's not really an entry ticket per se, it's more of an open question. It might be a quiz, but it's finding out what they can remember, finding out what they already know. Okay, so let's imagine that we are teaching this lesson. This is a lesson taken from Look Level 5, which is a National Geographic Learning Young Learner title. And I want to imagine we're presenting used to, and we've done a deductive grammar presentation. We've asked some questions, maybe we've done a little bit of guided discovery type questions, but before we move on to the actual control practice, I want to make sure that my students have a decent understanding of the grammar that I presented, right? Because there's no point in going on to control practice or freer practice until I know that my students are ready to do that. So how can I check that they understand the grammar? Now, you could say, do you understand the grammar? And they either put their hand up or they don't. It's too black and white, in my opinion. And also some students, they feel maybe a little threatened if they don't put their hand up. You know, I think I remember this as a student. I used to hate putting my hand up if I wasn't sure. And if the whole class had put their hand up, I would just put my hand up because I didn't want to be the odd one out. So we need to kind of give more options, let's say. So one of those is an activity, it's not even an activity, it's just a formative assessment technique called Fist to 5. So instead of saying, you know, do you understand the grammar or not, you say, okay, on a scale of 1 to 5, how confident are you with that grammar? So 5, I'm totally happy with this, I'm ready to move on. 4, I'm okay with it, it's no problem. 3, yeah, it's okay, it's fine. 2, I'm a little unsure still. 1, I'm really not sure, can we go over it again? So you get students either to hold their hand up like this or against their chest like this, because that way other students cannot see. I think that's important so they don't feel like they're being picked on or being left out. So if you just do like one like that, we know as a teacher how they feel about that particular grammar point. It's a bit safer and it gives you a very instant, clear idea of if you need to review the vocabulary or the grammar or move on. An alternative way of doing that, similar, it's just a traffic light system. So you make sure that all of your students have got a red card, an orange card or amber card, and a green card on their desk at all times. And very simply, are you ready to move on? Are you okay with the grammar? They hold up green. If they're not sure, they hold up the amber. If they're definitely not sure, the red. And again, it just shows you, the teacher, are they ready? Daria's made a really nice one there. I ask students to show by their facial expressions how they are. Really nice, grins to scowls. I like that idea. You know, the third version of this is just thumbs up, thumbs down, or in the middle. That way, straight away, I can see, am I ready to move on? Which students need more help, more attention? Now, we can do some of these activities or these forms of assessment in the online classroom, but during lockdown, during online teaching, I discovered a really cool tool that I want to share with you. And it's called whiteboard.fi, whiteboard.fi. And essentially what it is mini whiteboards for the learners, but the mini whiteboards are on their phones, on their devices. And you as a teacher have the big screen. So honestly, it's just so simple. You create a new board, you share the code with your learners, they log in and they get, that's what they see, the students, and this is what they get. They get their own mini whiteboard. So, you know, if we're lucky enough in the real world classroom to have mini whiteboards, we use those a lot. This is just a digital version of a mini whiteboard that every student can have, or a piece of paper, or however you want to use it. And of course, you can use it for lots of different activities like spellings, etc. But you can use it for formative assessment. And the beauty of this is only the teacher can see the answers. So maybe I say to my students, okay, on a scale of 1 to 10, how comfortable are you with this grammar point? And on their mini whiteboard, on whiteboard.fi, they write down the number. And then they press enter, and it sends directly to me, the teacher, on my computer, and I can see how they've done or how they're feeling about it. But I am the only person that can see this. Now, what's really nice about this assessment tool is that I can automatically save it. I can save all the whiteboards as a PDF. So I have an instant reference point for every single lesson or activity that I'm doing in class. And I should say, you know, you can use this in the online classroom, you can use it in the real world classroom if they've got their devices with them. So that's whiteboard.fi. I strongly recommend checking it out. It's completely free for use. Another tool which I kind of discovered while researching sort of formative assessment and technology is something called Plickers. This is actually, it's for the online, sorry, it's for the real world classroom. Okay, and essentially it's a way to collect instant feedback to multiple choice questions from students without them having to have computers or tablets or anything. So, and it essentially turns assessment or check-ins into opportunities to play and engages learners and empowers them to find out what they actually know. Essentially, it's a basis of cards. So every student has their own unique card. And depending on which way you turn it, it has 4 different options. So it might be, if we're doing it for formative assessment, A is like, I totally get it. B is like, I'm okay with it. C is, I'm not sure. D, I totally don't get it. And the teacher just scans it across the class, like you can see in the picture, and it gives you that formative feedback record. But for more information, go to get.plickers.com. It's definitely worthwhile having a look at. Okay, let's move on. So let's imagine that we have taught the grammar point. They're all happy with it. We're on to the controlled practice. This is the controlled practice activity here. And they've completed the activity, and I want to check how they have done. Now, of course, this is an easy way to formatively assess. You know, I think this is the easiest, and we do this all the time anyway, but maybe we kind of not taking note of it. But I think we should be mentally noting how students are doing. So there are 4 questions, and just very simply, you know, hands up if you got 4 out of 4. Hands up if you got 3 out of 4. Hands up if you got 2 out of 4. So it's very easy, very simple feedback for you, the teacher. And it gives you the opportunity to review the grammar point if needs be, or give more controlled practice. You know, if everybody's got 4 out of 4 on this controlled practice activity, am I realistically going to give them more controlled practice? Probably not, because clearly they have got the grammar point. And I don't want to bore them by doing more controlled practice. So it allows me to maybe skip a stage. In other words, adjust my teaching to their needs. So I might then jump automatically to a freer practice activity, like this one. So we've done the control practice, we're on to the freer practice because they were good with it. So slightly different way we can formatively assess this because it's not concrete, right? So in this case, let's talk about when you were younger with used to and the verbs from the box. Now, if they're just working in pairs, it's very difficult for the teacher to be able to get around the whole class and listen to everybody doing the activity, right? Because it'll end quite quickly. You just don't have time. So for this kind of activity, I want to make it, I want to elongate it. So I would make this into a class mingle type activity where I get everybody standing up, moving around the classroom, and every time I clap my hands, they change partners. This way, it gives students more practice of the grammar, repeated exposures, and it allows me, the teacher, to listen in to multiple students. And if I hear a mistake, if I hear an error, I can make an intervention. So the next time when they move on to a new partner, they can remember the intervention and make sure that it is correct. So I'm kind of giving the feedback at the source straight away where possible. And of course, then at the end of the activity, I can give feedback as a whole class of what they were doing well, what they were not doing well, as a whole class, rather than picking maybe on individual students. But also with a class mingle, you can get students to report back on what other people said to them. So in other words, they're feeding back on to the whole class. And again, it's an opportunity for me, the teacher, to gauge how they have done. And I think that's a really simple way of assessing their speaking in regards to a specific grammar point or specific vocabulary. And it gives you a much clearer idea of how they have grasped that target language because they're using it in a productive fashion. Okay, and again, similar kind of activity, work in pairs, discuss the questions, but again, turn it into a classroom mingle. Something else you could do as well is to give students responsibility for their own formative assessment. You know, formative assessment, it doesn't matter who's necessarily doing it. It could be a peer, it could be themselves, or it could be the teacher. That's kind of the beauty of formative assessment. It's informal. So something you could do if they've got their devices in the class, is to record themselves doing an activity. So they're in pairs. If you had a Patel, what would you use it for? And you get them to record themselves doing the task. They then listen back and you give them a set of success criteria for this. Did I use the grammar appropriately, or did I use in this case, the conditional, second conditional? Did I have the correct intonation and the correct pronunciation? How was my fluency? So you give them a little success criteria and they listen back and they check off whether they did these things. Someone just said in the chat box they use Flipgrid for these things. Flipgrid's brilliant for this type of activity, absolutely. It gives great formative assessment in the asynchronous classroom. You're absolutely right. Yeah, so Flipgrid is great. So, you know, most students will have a phone or a device, right? And normally you wouldn't let them use it, but I think we need to open up those opportunities of using it. So they record themselves, they listen back, success criteria, and then they repeat the task again, hopefully improving on what they did the first time around. Really simple, easy thing to do. Classroom mingles we've already spoken about. It gives multiple opportunities to use the language and multiple opportunities for you, the teacher, to check they are using the grammar, the vocabulary in an appropriate fashion and accurately. Okay. And the beauty of that is the fact that class mingles provide repetition, and it provides variety in that repetition. And certainly for me, repeating exercises or tasks is a safe way to assess young learners, especially for the very young ones, sort of grade ones, sort of 6, 7-year-olds, because regular repetition of activities is generally seen as an important part of learning. And it shows you that learning has taken place. And if they can repeat an activity more quickly and more accurately a second time and a third time, it shows you that learning is continuing. Indeed, sort of research by a guy called Martin Bygate suggests that once the speaker is more familiar with the content, this frees them up for not simply to make fewer errors or speak more quickly, but actually to pay more attention to how they formulate their meaning. So we might repeat in class. Okay, another great tip there from Marina. Marina says Vocaroo.com is a great way to record themselves. Absolutely, Vocaroo is also a good program. But yeah, just looking at repetition, we might want to do a task at a later date. Yes, they've done the task on used to really well in class, but how well are they going to do it in a week's time or 2 weeks' time? So it's always a good idea to go back to tasks you've done previously, just as a sort of a quick 5-minute warmer to a class. So much in the same way we might use an entry ticket, but this is a little bit more in depth. And certainly this is something that in Look, we do, it's kind of explicitly presented, okay? So we have this formative assessment framework. So we're looking here at a particular speaking activity. So they do it in units 2 and 4, but then they repeat it throughout the course, once, maybe twice. And that allows you, the teacher, to see how that learning is progressing. Of course, you need to record this. So, you know, we have the student progress log where we can see, it's going to get my highlighter. So we've got here the assessment 1, the feedback I gave at that time, and then at a later date, I do the assessment again. So A, excellent, B, satisfactory, C, needs to improve. Same for the listening, speaking, writing, and linguistics as well. So it just means that I can make sure they've remembered what we taught. And if we need to go back and do it again, I can adjust my teaching to do that. Okay, it's giving half an eye on the clock. So all of that is kind of in-class activities. At the end of the class, we want to make sure that everyone is happy with what they have done. So a lot of you mentioned this, we talked about exit tickets earlier. And for me, there are many, many advantages of exit tickets, which all link directly to the idea of formative assessment. It provides that quick snapshot of who gets it, who doesn't get it. So maybe during the lesson, one student is kind of in the middle, but I want to know how that student feels at the end of the lesson. So I can use an exit ticket for that. It provides me data on student progress. It facilitates reflection opportunities for learners. And this is really important. You know, if they are given responsibility for their own learning, it empowers them. It makes them think, well, how well have I understood used to? How well can I use used to? It gives them that responsibility. It gives them agency. It makes them accountable for their learning. It also offers that mode of communication to students and teachers. It keeps them focused and on task, and it allows them to ask questions. You know, very often we might ask a class in the class, does anyone have any questions about this grammar point? And nobody puts their hand up because they don't want to be the student who doesn't understand, right? So they all keep their hands down. So it gives them that opportunity, them a forum to ask questions, and as such allows them to self-assess. So what do exit tickets look like? Well, there are many different types. You go online, you can find all kinds. Here are some that I've kind of mocked up. 3 things I learned today, 2 things I found interesting, 1 question I still have. Nice one. The emoji one, students love the emoji one because it speaks their language, right? These 2 up here. Today's lesson, I got it, I need more help. I liked, I didn't like. I liked, I learned, I have a question. Or just a very simple one at the bottom here. How confident are you with what we learned today? These very sort of simple, clear exit tickets. And they don't have to take any time at all. It's literally 1 minute at the end of the lesson, and then they hand them in to you. Other ways you can do this is something called these are just varieties, by the way. They're not a whole separate thing. Bulletin boards. So you give every student a Post-it note, and they stick it on the board at the end of the lesson. What stuck with you today? Could be 1 question. Give me a score from 1 to 5 of how confident you are. What did you enjoy most about the lesson? Stick it on the board. Another activity takes a little bit longer. Roll the dice. So you have a dice, or maybe a couple of dice moving around the classroom, and they roll the dice and they have to finish the sentence. So if they roll a 1, they say, I want to remember this point of the lesson. Number 2, something I learned today was. Number 3, 1 word to sum up what I learned, etc. Number 5, I'm still confused about. So there's it's a bit of a lottery of what they have to say, right? So it means that there's a variety of feedback that you get from learners. I guess the question we need to consider though is, what do you do with the content? You've got all these exit tickets, you've got all this information. You need to ask yourself the question, how am I going to use this data? What should I do with it? And you know, clearly you need to analyze it, you need to sort it, put it into 3 different groups. So those who are really happy with it, no problems. Those who are in the middle, those who need more group or more practice at it, need more support. And then you can put them into those groups, and then you can plan your instruction for the next lesson. Now, it might be that at the beginning of the next lesson, you give the I got it students a little speaking activity to do. Maybe the need to clarify, they do a little bit of control practice in a small group. And then the smaller group, you might have a bit of teacher time with that group, clarifying that grammar, clarifying that vocabulary. So it allows you to act immediately on what you've taught, and ensure that every student is getting what they need. I just want to share with you another online tool for formative assessment, and it's called summative.com. It's a really cool website. You can do lots of different things with it there. You can do quizzes, you can do just on-the-spot questions, but for me, the best thing about it are exit tickets. It's a really, really simple service to use, completely free. You log in, you get a teacher's account, and then you share that room code with your learners. So my room code would be this one up here, Warren 7543. And then you would click on exit ticket and it has preset questions. So first question, how well did you understand today's materials? Totally got it, pretty well, not very well, not at all. Question number 2, what did you learn today? So more an open-ended question. And then number 3 is a teacher's choice question. Now you'd ask this live in the classroom. What did you have most difficulty with in the class? What did you find most enjoyable in the class? Whatever you like. Once everyone's answered all the questions, you get a nice little table, so you get a clear reference point of how your students are doing. And the best thing about it is you can export it into an Excel document, PDFs, etc. So you have that record. You can see exactly how they are doing. Okay, thanks. Bible says summative is the best. It is really good. Okay, we're going to run out of time. So that's exit tickets. Very quick few other ideas on formative assessment. Games. Games are a great opportunity for formative assessment because students are engaged. It's recycling language across a unit. You can listen in to multiple people. Projects. We all know the benefits of projects for student-focused learning, but also pulls together all of that learning, especially if they're doing a class presentation. And certainly that's something I would encourage to do, and you have a set of rubric of how students are doing. Pronunciation, use of grammar, vocabulary, fluency, etc. And certainly any young learner coursebook has that kind of project work within it. Review units, again, most coursebooks have these. Great opportunity for formative assessment because it sums up the whole unit of work, or in this case, every 2 units of work. So within Look, it's every 2nd unit. And it kind of recycles things they might have done 2, 3, 4 weeks ago. Can they remember? Do I need to go back and reteach it? And specifically with Look, we also have an element of self-assessment as well. And I think self-assessment is a vitally important part of formative assessment because we want students to reflect. Now, in this case, it's just a very simple case of, yes, I can do it, or no, I need more practice. For me, though, this is potentially a little bit black and white. So for me personally, when I'm doing formative assessment and self-assessment, I ask them to put numbers between 1 and 5. 5, I'm completely happy with this. 1, I'm not happy with this at all. I can't do it. I need more help. And then, as a teacher, I'm going to monitor the classroom, walk around the classroom and see how people are doing. What are they writing? So I know what students need, which students need more help. Yeah, really nice. Good, Leanna. She circles the emoji of how well they've done the task. Great. Okay, another couple of tools you can use. Learning management systems are superb for formative assessment because they just get all of the data in one place. So with all National Geographic Learning titles, we have a learning management system whereby you can set activities, assignments for students to do on their mobile phones. So that we know students enjoy doing stuff on their phones. So utilize it. Robert, I know I've got 2 minutes. It's okay. And the beauty of using a learning management system is that it collates all of your students' results in one place. You can compare how students are doing to each other. You can see how they're doing across the whole year. It is a one-stop stop for your students' progress. Last couple of things. We said earlier that formative assessment can be informal or formal. So the kind of the homework, the assignments, that's more formal. Unit tests are formative assessment because they are not high stakes. They're not the end of year test of how well am I doing. It's assessing a unit of work of a specific grammar point, specific vocabulary. We use that results to inform our further teaching. Do we need to go back and look at used to? Do we need to go back and look at this key vocabulary or not? So don't think a unit test is summative assessment. It isn't, it's formative assessment. Last little thing, I promise. I've got 30 seconds, I think. Feedback. Feedback is important to formative assessment. Without it, there's no point in doing any kind of formative assessment or assessment at all. Because good formative assessment includes feedback that is related to the learning goals, provides opportunities for the students to revise and improve work products and deeper understanding. It's not just looking backwards, it's looking forwards. What can they do better next time? Give them suggestions, give them advice. But that's a whole other talk. So just to sum up very quickly, use formative assessment to maximize learning by using entrance and exit tickets, gauging understanding through the different stages of the lesson, thumbs up, thumbs down, fist of 5, incorporating project work where possible, using repetition tasks, using games to check comprehension, using formative assessment tools, homework, end of unit tests, and giving appropriate formative feedback. So I would be amiss talking about feedback not to ask you for some formative feedback. So in the chat box, please can you write down one thing you learned today, one thing you found interesting, or if you want, one question you still have. Thank you so much. I apologize for running over by a minute and a half. Sorry, Robert.
That's okay.
All of the examples I should say came from Look. So you have, you can find more information on that on the National Geographic Learning website. And I'm going to share the link in the website, in the chat box. Okay. There we go. That's the website. Oh, I've just done it privately. Let's do that again. Actually, what I can do is even better than that. I'm going to put a little box on the screen. I think. There we go. eltngl.com/look. Okay, thank you so much for your time. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you've taken something away. Just looking at the chat box with the feedback, the exit tickets you have, which is great. So thank you once again, and I will hopefully see some of you later on this morning for me, or this afternoon for you. Robert, over to you.